the testes had been taken off, so there's no testosterone. Obviously, there's no estrogen because there's no ovaries. So up until age 11, I was completely androgynous, at which point they tell me, oh, your ovaries were damaged and they were removed, therefore you've got to take estrogen, obviously to start the actual reassignment. If there was ever a point to start to discuss things with me, with the medical profession, it would have been that point. And they didn't. And I think there was a reason why they didn't.
This is most definitely a remarkable story. Sophie Ottaway was 22 when she discovered, quite by chance, that she had in fact been born a boy. She had surgery when she was 2 days old to make her appear like a girl. She'd been born with a rare condition that affected her bladder and penis. And doctors told her parents that surgery was the only way to avoid a childhood of constant hospitalisation and an adulthood of erectile dysfunction. Sophie is 37 now. She spoke to the Telegraph magazine and is now able to talk to us in her first broadcast interview. She's in the studio. Morning to you.
Good morning.
This is an amazing story.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely amazing. I just... When people say that, though, and you must have had a lot of feedback and a lot of response from people, how do you describe your story? What adjectives do you use?
Well, do you know what? For me, it's just been life, because we can only know what we've lived, and for me, this is the only life I've lived. So to me, I know it's a crazy story, but it's just been life, really.
But it wasn't your kind of informed life until you were 22.
No, I mean, it's definitely been a roller coaster, and it's definitely been very difficult in places. And yeah, but I think I've come to terms with things, and that's what's led me to where we are today.
Yes. Tell us then what happened when you were 22. How did you find out about all of this?
So my mum always used to like to accompany me to the doctors, even at age 22, which is quite bizarre. And I thought, oh, she's been a good mum, which she is a good mum. Shout out to mum. But she came along, and it was a routine appointment. But I thought I had tonsillitis, and there was a locum GP. So clearly the standard GPs had been informed, this girl doesn't know these things, kind of stuff. And I looked at the computer screen, and there was some notes on the screen whereby the clinician had been reading them, and I saw the top two lines in bold, which pretty much spelt it all out in clinical terms about what would happen. What had happened, that it was an XY birth. There was a phallus that had been split and was removed, and the removal of testes and a vaginal reconstruction. So yeah, it was quite a unique day, to be honest. I've had better days.
Well, I'm sure. But at that point, when you're reading this, do you instantly ask, what on earth does that mean? Or did you just keep it quiet and go home and then discuss it?
Well, I'm never one for causing a fuss. Well, I wasn't at 22, but I've learned a lot since then. I know I held it together in the doctors, got in the car, got in my mum's car, and then literally flipped.
What did you say?
Well, there was a lot of expletives, of which I've promised not to use on the show.
Gillian Keegan has already got there.
Oh no, someone's got the trophy. I was just like, what on earth? Because it explained so many things. Growing up feeling like I questioned my sexuality the whole time through my teens, and it was quite repressed. And I thought, not that there's anything at all wrong with being gay. That's amazing. But I thought that was maybe who I was. But it answered a lot of things around that, and a lot of the things around sort of my anatomy, and a lot of it not being right, and questions not being answered. But there was a lot of pain, because, hang on, the people closest to you had this information, the doctors had the information, the parents had the information, and it was a lot to process.
Was this initial conversation all in the car?
Well, I can't remember it clearly, but yeah, there was a lot of ranting in the car. What I do remember is my dad was working in Sheffield at the time, and me and my mum got home, and I didn't want to talk about it at that point. I'd had my rant, and my dad got sent home from work early to come home,
What was their kind of overriding explanation for it all? How did they kind of justify what had happened? Not just what the decision that had been made, but the decision not to tell you.
Well, you have to remember, we're going back to the 1980s where we didn't have smartphones in our pockets. We don't have Google. We can't just look something up. And, you've got someone that's been in a long labour with a poorly baby that's on death's door. And you've got the man in the white coat. And the man in the white coat has a really great plan to save this baby. They said, with anything, you have to look at intent. You have to look. People can do interesting things, but if the heart was in the right place and they meant well for you, then you can't go against that. That really. And for me, that's what me and my parents are tight these days. We're really tight because I know they'd never ever want to do anything to hurt me. They did what the doctors told them, and the doctors told them, you don't tell Sophie.
Really, whatever.
Yeah, basically, it'd be too psychologically damaging if the patient finds out what we've done. So we recommend that, you just don't let the patient know, you don't let them find out. And obviously, there'd been a little slip at the GP's surgery. But the one thing that I would like to put across is that once I'd found this information out, and the GP surgery was actually aware that I'd found this information out, when I presented with sort of lots of drug and alcohol problems later down the line, there was no sign of any mental health help. Oh, you look like a girl, you appear like a girl, what seems to be your problem?
Right. Well, we'll get into that. I mean, is it ethical? Is that ethical for doctors to say never tell
Of course not. I mean,
your daughter?
Absolutely not. There's nothing ethical about it. But I've had an inbox off the back of the Telegraph article where people have been sending in their stories, and if you think my story's bad, it's the tip of the iceberg.
That is absolutely shocking. You've met the surgeon who operated on you.
I have.
What did you? Was it a he?
I'll go with that. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay, what did you have to say to him? What did he have to say to you?
We'd had a series of very heated email exchanges that had got more and more heated as time had gone on. And I decided that, despite the fact that I was very angry, that if I wanted to reconcile my pain and I wanted to, move on and forgive, that I'm going to have to sort of meet this guy, because otherwise I'm just going to be hounding him for the rest of his life. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe he was just following medical pathways. It's paint by numbers, a lot of the stuff at the moment, isn't it? If presented with this but he was a young surgeon at the time. I've decided to preserve the name of the surgeon just out of respect for the fact that the man did save my life, but he also did a lot of other things. And I don't want him to suffer, but I do want to talk about the experience.
But so not naming him, obviously we don't want to do that, but how did he justify why he said to your parents, this is the best course of events?
That's a good question. We didn't. Well, he sort of talked about the sort of psychological side of things, and if you look at all the nurture versus nature methodologies, that if you pump a kid with hormones, you can nurture them into be wherever they are. But rather than answer for what happened to me, he was more keen to go down the route. Well, what if we'd left you the other way? So it was, I didn't feel like we resolved things in the conversation, but I've got massive respect for the fact that he did turn up.
So just to summarise, the doctors were saying that the only way to avoid a childhood of constant hospitalisation and an adulthood of erectile dysfunction was to operate on you.
So it was bladder and bowel on the outside of your body, a split penis. It was quite a rare disorder. It's one in 200 to 400,000 live births, so it's quite a rare disorder. But it's madness. I mean, I have my own views on what the agenda was, but it is absolute madness. And to think that you didn't have those clinical pathways in place to then, if that patient finds out, to pick up on the mental health side. Because of course the patient's going to find out at some point, inevitable.
You say that you have your views on the agenda. Do you want to share them?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I do actually, thank you. Yeah, so I think it all stems back to Dr. Jon Joan, who was a New Zealand psychologist. He started working on a theory in 1955 around gender, which I'll come back to in a moment. But he did an experiment on two twins. It's called the Jon Joan case, if anybody Googles it, and it's about a guy called David Reimer. Two twins were born in Winnipeg. They both had a routine circumcision, but they used a heat tool, and sadly the heat tool completely decimated one of the children's penises. In order to rectify this, the family were looking for a solution. Now we've got John Money, who was over in New Zealand, who was practicing through Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and he then offered up the solution. I've been looking into all this gender theory and gender reassignment, and I think that, we can use nurture. We can transform his gender and raise him a girl, of which they did. And it was a failed case. He was told at 15, he changed back, he was depressed, and he eventually committed suicide in 2004. Yet the whole time they was touting this around as a great success around the world. And that is what informed the medical pathways going forward.
Goodness me. So much else to ask.
Do you wish they'd left you as a boy then? Is that what it amounts to now?
No. I mean, who knows? I can only ever talk about the life I've lived, because how would I know what it would be like to have a split penis and erectile dysfunction? But what I would like to think about is I think it's about informed consent, right? So if you look at people born with issues like me, or people that are born intersex, where they're not sure either way, I think they should do the bare minimum, do what it is to keep that baby safe, and then let the patient make those decisions at a point of which they're informed consent. Because up until I had no test, the testes had been taken off, so there's no testosterone. Obviously, there's no estrogen because there's no ovaries. So up until age 11, I was completely androgynous. At which point they tell me, oh, your ovaries were damaged and they were removed, therefore you've got to take estrogen. Obviously, to start the actual reassignment. If there was ever a point to start to discuss things with me, with the medical profession, it would have been that point. And they didn't. And I think there was a reason why they didn't.
But is that not slightly on your parents as well? At that point, they could have.
Well, I mean, it's a big, big thing to put on the weight of two normal people. And at that point, I mean, how do you sit down with someone? How do you do that? I mean, I couldn't have done it.
There's this, I mean, so I've got about 15 other questions I want to ask you, but I suppose what I want to know is, this is something that happened to you, that you found out about when you were 22. You're 37 now.
Yeah.
Why now in 2023 do you want to tell this, story that a lot of people will connect with?
So for me, it has to come out now, immediately. And it's the reason why we're trying to get some of this before the documentary airs in 18 months. I believe we're at the height of the discussion now around gender affirming care for young children that present feeling like they're not in the right body. And I feel that from my experiences, a unique experience whereby my gender was changed and I didn't know about it, but through working on myself and understanding the inside, I've actually decided that I am in the wrong body, but I'm not going to do anything physical to change back. And I feel like that from my story, there might be some lessons that could be learned that might help to improve those, not only the pathways around gender affirming care for people that present it feeling like they're in the wrong body, but also pathways for those that are born with urological problems and intersex, about the sort of first do no harm stuff. But it feels like we're at the peak of the debate, and my story might weigh into influencing society's views.
So is your view then that actually interventionist behaviour from the medical side of things for teenagers, whether it be puberty blockers or when they're older it becomes surgery, you feel like you're almost a cautionary tale in that area?
I feel so. I feel that way because obviously I was on the hormones for the best part of 20 years without choice. I stopped taking them 5 years ago. I was 4 stone heavier. I was having lots of depression, all sorts of things. So obviously the long-term use of the hormones, not to mention the fact that it can be quite damaging to your health in the long term. But yeah, I do feel that we're rushing, children down irreversible pathways, even puberty blockers. There's no real long-term studies, but there's been cases of infertility and all sorts with the puberty blockers, and the surgeries. Obviously, once you've gone down that route, it's very difficult to go back. And I think I have absolutely all respect for anyone that wants to go that path. But I think when you're younger, it's all about resolving the problems that you have inside. They might be depressed, they might not fit in at school, they might have all of these things. They're vulnerable.
Just finally, at the age of 37, which you are now, do you feel completely, or I don't know, how do you feel about the body that you're in now? Do you feel that you are in the right body now?
I actually don't care about the body whatsoever. And I think that's where we're going wrong with everything. We've got boxes everywhere for everything. And we all try to fit the person into a box. Yet society has created all the boxes. I genuinely believe that all we really are is souls inside a shell that are here to live an experience in this earth. And whether you can change anything about my outside body, my avatar, but does it really change how I am with someone, how we're interacting right now? No, it doesn't. I think I really want to start the conversation for people to think about the boxes and what is the worthiness of the boxes apart from creating division.
Okay. Sophie, thank you. Absolutely fascinating. And thank you for just, being so open about it, because it really is some story. That's Sophie Ottaway. And as Sophie said, there's going to be a documentary coming out in the next 18 months or so. So do watch out for that.